What also concerns me, and I agree with that summary there, but what also concerns me is this idea that in the media we should have, I think, voices of reason. In government we should have voices of reason. You've got this moral equivalence between a democratic nation state with a rule of law that has put sort of suicide bombers in prison via a trial process, somehow equating the hostages with the prisoners, but also a terror organisation running Gaza as somehow legitimate in this debate, and all this misinformation and historical ignorance playing out in how people are responding to this crisis in countries like Australia, UK, US and more. That's what worries me longer term.
Well, you're right, Peter. The level of ignorance about the basic history of this, about how the whole Jewish populations all over Africa and the Middle East were expropriated and expelled, about the number of times all of Israel's Arab neighbours have attacked it with a view to destroying its very existence. The most powerful state in the region, Iran, rapidly acquiring nuclear weapons, saying it plans to wipe Israel off the map. So the question of proportionality in the morality of Israel's response, it's not acting proportionately to the shocking murder of 1,200 people and the sadistic rape and kidnap involved 250 other people. It's acting proportionately to an existential crisis, an existential threat to its very existence as a nation. And again, I just can't believe how bad the Albanese government has been on this. I mean, Penny Wong is in many ways the most formidable member of the government, but every time she talks about this, she effectively equates Israel and Gaza. She says, rather inexplicably, we've offered 800 visas to Palestinians, whereas, there are millions and millions of Muslims all around Palestine, but of course those nations don't offer refuge to any Palestinians. And she says, but never mind, we've offered 1,700 visas to Israelis, as though citizens of Israel, which have never ever posed any risk of extremism or anything in Australia ever in their history, and as you say, come from a democratic nation with the rule of law and so on, are to be equated with Gaza, which is drenched in anti-Semitism and hatred, and which elected Hamas as their government. Now that, you're still not indifferent to the terrible suffering which Hamas has wrought on its own people, but the government's absolute moral tin ear on all this, it just doesn't look like it exists in the real world. It exists in a sort of a Labor Party debating club or something where it's saying, well, let's balance off the votes of southwest Sydney. We don't want to upset the Jewish lobby. And by golly, we got challenge from the Greens in our inner cities and they hate Israel. So we just show everybody we're equally distant from everybody. I don't think it's had a speck of moral substance or gravity about it for the whole of this crisis.
No, it hasn't, Greg, and that's a great shame. Thank you for your time, Greg Sheridan. Great to have your company as always.